Though the Orokin towers are now derelict, locked away in the void, they are still a potential threat to all who enter. Their original inhabitants having long since vanished, they are home now only to those who were foolish enough to enter without ample preparation. For within these towers lies a latent force left behind by the Orokin to guard these massive vessels in their stead. These are the Orokin Neural Sentries. The Orokin Neural Sentry is only briefly mentioned in-game, yet the effect it has is profound. The Lotus explains that this mysterious sentry is capable of subsuming the minds of anything that enters without being prepared. It would seem that from the way the Lotus speaks of this sentry, it is in control of the tower as a whole, most likely operating the massive ship from a central position with remote defenses like turrets, traps, and some sort of mental assimilation field, and not roaming the halls as a physical form of defense. Yet, it is clearly capable of having a physical effect on those it corrupts. Individuals who are dominated by the tower are implanted with a horrific golden seal that burrows through their facial region, most likely into their brain, and takes hold there, though in what capacity is uncertain. If these physical implants are required to dominate an individual, it brings up the question of how they are introduced to each victim. It is possible that existing corrupted are responsible for catching trespassers and implanting these control devices, but this would seem like an unsustainable system, with corrupted eventually running out. Though this would explain why our extermination missions are so important. Once we have exterminated all corrupted, the tower has no capability to subsume any more minds and instead must resort to automated defenses. If these devices are indeed necessary for corruption, it begs the question of who installed them first. With no more Orokin to implant the devices, is it really possible that a never-ending cycle of corrupted can somehow add to itself? Or are there perhaps some ancient corrupted within the towers that remain away from the front lines? It is quite possible that the assimilation process renders the subject immortal to a certain extent, as otherwise, corrupted would simply die of hunger or age due to the obtrusive facial implants preventing eating and drinking, thus making them an inefficient security system. Although, it is another possibility that the corrupted somehow sustain themselves through some form, perhaps with the facial implants serving as life support devices to maintain the corrupted husks for all eternity if need be. Though besides the physical implant theory, a more likely possibility is that the Neural Sentry is capable of altering the minds of individuals who enter unshielded without need of physical implant, and the implants simply serve as marks of disgrace to differentiate the corrupted from standard units. Perhaps this mark of distinction extends to the clothing of the corrupted, forcing them to don armor and robing of white to match the desires of their long-dead masters. Though this would seem odd given the design of their new clothing, leading me to believe that the void itself can somehow stain these various armaments and even the flesh of the corrupted itself to a pale white after extended unshielded exposure to the raw void energies. Though now it merely guards from the would-be looters of the Origin system, the Neural Sentry was at one point utilized by the Orokin. What its use could have been is uncertain, but it is very likely similar to its current status. Given what we know of the Orokin and their penchant for extremely harsh punishments, the Neural Sentry could have been employed against soldiers or rule breakers aboard tower ships who proved unruly. With such finality in the Orokin's decisions, it would not be surprising if they would sooner turn an ornery worker into an obedient slave. Another possibility is that it protected against rebels and attackers. If a life form was detected aboard the tower vessel that it did not recognize, it would spring into action and convert it into a loyal soldier. This would be useful in deterring the rebel forces during the uprising, reducing enemy numbers while simultaneously adding to the Orokins. One interesting factor to note is the Sentry's ability to assimilate infested flesh. This brings up multiple questions about the infestation and the Neural Sentry, many of which are difficult to answer. It is thought that each individual spore of an infested is separate and act as a whole, so how is the Neural Sentry able to contain them all? What if the infestation is a hive mind? Did the Orokin possess a knowledge of how to pluck individual infested from the embrace of the hive and supplant it with an artificial hive mind led by the Sentry? Or is it possible that infestation leaves the individual lucid, as seen with Alad V, and the Sentry is merely corrupting the individual? These are questions of some debate and most likely a video topic in the future. Despite the Neural Sentry's oppressive power, it is still able to be avoided. As stated by the Lotus, the corrupted are a result of poor planning by would-be raiders, indicating that it is indeed possible to adequately prepare for the towers. Perhaps the capture targets we track in the towers are such individuals, as they seem to be swathed in a light that allows them to avoid the Sentry's wrath. This shield could act as either a protective field, or a cloaking device that masks their very presence, or even fools the Sentry into believing they are authorized to be on board. Whatever this field is, it is likely that the Tenno utilize a similar system as well, as we are clearly not allowed on board these vessels given the Corrupted's penchant to attack us. However, we could simply be immune to the Sentry's corrupting presence and require no shielding to roam the towers. Another question to cover is Vor and his ability to roam the void. It is unlikely he is subjected to the Neural Sentry's power, as he lacks the trademark faceplate and is able to roam across multiple towers, with each sentry seemingly responsible for only a single vessel. Therefore, it is likely that the Janus key acts in a similar capacity to the shielding devices mentioned earlier, or the fact that he has been resurrected by the key fools the Neural Sentry into believing he is authorized on board the towers. If this is the case, then one must wonder if it is Vor's own zealous fury that commands his actions, or the Janus key's influence, as the Neural Sentry is no longer a part of the equation. As for what exactly the Sentry is, it is unclear. It is very possible the Neural Sentries are forms of cephalons left behind by the Orokin, and they simply have no need to communicate with us in any way. Alternatively, they could be a much simpler force and have mostly automated processes. Hence their low ability to defend against our attacks once we have exhausted their resources, whereas a cephalon could easily take more drastic measures if need be. Whatever these sentries are, they are an oppressive force within the towers and could potentially be responsible for the hushed whispers and moans we hear booming throughout the entire ships, even when no corrupted are present. But as with many things in the Warframe universe, these are mostly uncertain and are not the only interpretation. But until the time comes when we have all the facts, this is what we know.